Hello, this week we'll be talking about business processes. This is chapter 7 in our textbook. When you're reading a text, please focus on section 7-1 to 7-3. You can pretty much skip over 7-4 and 7-5 and read 7-6. In addition, please take a look in Canvas. There's a short video from CBS This Morning, and it's talking about Henry Ford's development of the automobile production line. And what I want you to take away from that is if you look at it, he started out first making cars that were custom built, and then after seeing the meatpacking plants in Chicago and they had assembly lines, he thought, well, I could apply that also to automobiles. And so if you think about that, you can apply very different processes to the production of the same product. The other video I want you to watch out there is one by David Autor, and it's Will Machines Take Away All of Our Jobs? Please take a look also at a short HBR article posted in Canvas. It's called How Artificial Intelligence Will Redefine Management. Let's start with this illustration, which we've seen before this semester. This is a process that goes through, and you start first by analyzing your industry using a model such as Porter's 5 forces. And then depending on what forces are strong in your industry, you would decide on what strategy you're going to follow. And then based on that strategy, you would decide where should you make your investments? What processes should you spend your money on? An example we've talked about before is if you take two retailers, say Walmart and Neiman Marcus. Walmart is going to be on the low cost end. So they're going to focus on processes that are going to save them cost, reduce their cost of purchasing, reduce their cost of inventory. On the other hand, Neiman Marcus is very high touch, and so they were going to spend more money on things such as customer care. They have people that'll be your personal shopper that'll help you as you're buying at the store. When we now get to this part where we're building in step 4 the business processes, we're going to build systems that are based on where do we want to put our investment, such as Walmart again. Walmart is known for having very sophisticated systems for inventory management, purchasing, and keeping costs to a minimum. They're not going to spend a lot on tracking each customer's personal preferences to give them the most personal service. Neiman Marcus, on the other hand, would have a reason to invest in that type of system. Before we dive into the chapter, I want to emphasize one point here. The same product can be built by very different processes, from completely automated to totally not automated. There's a CBS This Morning video that's in Canvas that I'd like you to watch. It's talking about Henry Ford and looking back at the inspiration for his assembly line. He famously said the Model T, which is pictured there in the upper left-hand corner, you can have it in any color you want as long as it's black. The second car in the middle there is the Nissan GT-R, and it's also made on an assembly line, but the engines are hand assembled, and there's actually a nameplate on each engine that says who is the person that assembled that engine. And in the lower right hand corner is someone named Jesse James. He started a custom motorcycle shop out here in California, and each vehicle is hand built, custom made for the customer, and even the selection of customers is somewhat custom made in that if for some reason he decided he did not like someone, he would not sell them a motorcycle. There's 5 topics about processes that I'm going to talk about today. The first 4 are from the book, and the last one on automation is from the HBR article in Canvas and the video with David Autor. The first topic we're going to talk about is whether processes are structured or dynamic. Later in our discussion of automation, the processes that are right for automation are those that are more structured, but there can also be very structured processes that involve no automation. I'm going to share a short video clip here. This is a time and motion study done by Frank and Lillian Gilbreth. You can see it clearly predates computers since the video does not have any sound. Here they are studying the steps that bricklayers take in building a wall. By identifying the motions of the bricklayers and measuring the time for the process, they can redesign the process to be more efficient and also easier on the bricklayers. In some ways, this shares similarities with business process reengineering, and the consultants first go out and interview the people performing the process, just as Frank and Lillian went out and observed the bricklayers. Also, the same process can be structured and automated, or unstructured and not automated. For example, a latte or espresso can be generated by a machine such as the Nescafé machine shown here, or it could be created manually by a barista, such as the man in the picture shown here, who won a competition for his latte art. This table from the book shows the difference between structured and dynamic processes. So on the left-hand side are the structured processes. They tend to be more operational in nature. They're standardized. They usually are well documented and formally defined. There's not a lot of exceptions, and one of the examples they have is purchasing or order entry. On the other side are the dynamic processes. These generally are more strategic or higher level managerial decisions. They're more fluid. They're usually informal. They're adaptive, and they involve collaboration or social networking and handle ambiguous situations. So for today's exercise that you'll be working with your team, or this week's exercise, I should say, that you'll be working with your team, you're looking at processes and how they're affected by COVID-19. And one thing you can look at there is there's some processes such as purchasing. If you were to think about a hospital's purchasing of what they call personal protective equipment or PPE, it would be generally probably a very structured process of order entry and purchasing. But in a crisis situation, it has become far more fluid as states and hospitals are competing for resources, and higher level managers or governors even are getting involved in the purchasing process. The next aspect of processes that we're going to take a look at is what's known as the scope of the process, whether it's a work group or an enterprise process or even an inter-enterprise process. The advantage of work group processes are that they're simpler and the information systems for them are simpler. A process such as this is focused on a single function, so you only need buy-in from the managers that are actually in a particular department that's implementing the software, and only their employees need to be trained on the new system. This is important because a change in systems often means a change in procedures and possibly a change in employees who might need new skills. And as we discussed earlier in the semester, changing the processes and people in an information system is the most difficult part. The downside to a work group process is that data is kept at the department level. So to the extent that other departments have their own version of that data, this can result in what's known as data silos, which means each department has what's known as its own version of the truth. So what is a data silo? This is where different departments have different versions of what really should be the same data. It's often called different versions of the truth. So this is a table from the book, and the first row is an example where, say, a customer has relocated, but the marketing department and the accounting department actually have different versions of the customer information. So the accounting department is still sending any billing information to the old address. The second row is an example where marketing and accounting have different outstanding balances for a client. So marketing is trying to sell something to a customer, and they put in a request for a certain level of credit for that customer based on what their outstanding balance already is. The accounting department, however, knows that there's been additional receipts that the marketing department does not know about, and so the amount they approve is lower, and so then the marketing department's stuck in a bit of a bind wondering if only a part of the transaction was approved. The third and fourth rows are looking at cases where this was a bank called IndyMac, and they were acquired by One West when the FDIC came in and closed them down. So marketing could be looking at it and saying, well, IndyMac, are they a preferred customer? They haven't been ordering much lately. And the accounting department, on the other hand, might know that they're behind on their payments, or that even the company acquiring them, One West, has been slow on paying. And so marketing may be giving incentives for them to purchase, while at the same time accounting would not want to extend credit to the company. Data silos can also slow down a process, or possibly even threaten your job. Back when I was in industry, I was working on a software assignment at a large insurance company, and what they were trying to do is close their books, as it's called, at the end of the quarter. And most of their investments are market-based, so you should say that they could value their assets at the end of the quarter. But because they had different systems and the systems did not talk to each other, they were very slow in closing their books. And when the new CEO came in, he fired 10 of 12 director-level people who were involved in the process. So figure 7-12 is shown here. Shows a workgroup process that's now been re-engineered to have a single version of the data. And this is what's known as an enterprise system. So it's going across different work groups, but they have one version of the data. So could there ever be valid reasons for having different versions of the data? One example is Thomas Davenport, who we heard from earlier on big data, where he compared the 3 V's to cockroaches. And he was saying that if a company is client-focused, they should be arguing about what the definition of a customer is. Now that'll sound pretty odd, really, because if they're client-focused, they ought to know who their customer is. But if you think back to, we're in the big data exercise, we're looking at Yelp, and there's people in Yelp who are focused on selling services to businesses. However, there's other people within Yelp who would say that the customer is the person using Yelp to find local businesses. So depending on who you're talking to within Yelp, they might have different definitions of what a customer is. Another example is Walmart. So Walmart has, obviously, physical bricks and mortar stores, but they also have a large online presence. And essentially, these two are competing against each other, but they're the same company. There's an example where a father was with his son, and they were shopping for a Lego kit. And he had seen it cheaper online at Walmart, and so when he went there and saw it was a higher price, he asked the manager to do a price match. But they refused. They'll match another company online, but they wouldn't match Walmart online. So standing in the aisle, he orders it on Walmart online, and while they're standing there, they see one of the store staff come along, and they pick it up off the shelf and take it over to the area where you can pick up your online purchases. However, he couldn't pick it up that day because he had not yet received the message from Walmart online that his package was ready. So Walmart realized they have an issue here. They don't want these two divisions competing against each other. And so what they did was they said each manager of a bricks and mortar store, they would get credit for any online sales that were within a certain radius of their store. So for compensation purposes, that sale is being counted twice. Once is Walmart online, and again for the bricks and mortar store. Well, that solves their incentive issue for compensation purposes. On the other hand, for financial reporting purposes, they can't count that sale twice. So the definition of store sales would be different for compensation purposes in the HR department than it would be for the accounting department for doing financial reporting. So one type of enterprise system is an enterprise resource planning system, commonly referred to as an ERP system. These take a modular approach, bringing together different functions, but having an integrated database so that there's one version of the truth. ERP systems are sold by large vendors such as SAP or Oracle, Prior to that, some companies tried to develop their own system in-house, but these often failed due to the enormity of the project and their complexity. Also, early on, vendors such as SAP would customize the software for customers, but now ERP systems are generally built on top of blueprints, and this means that customers, to some degree at least, have to adapt to the software instead of the other way around, and the vendors have blueprints for different industries. One possible drawback is that if every company within an industry is using the same blueprint, that there's no strategic advantage to their information system. So there are trade-offs between having an ERP system customized for a particular company versus using a blueprint. What would these be? If you're using a blueprint, it means your people are going to have to adapt somewhat, at least, which means that your procedures and your people are going to change. And that's the hardest thing to change. From a manager's perspective, if a vendor can come in and say, your process will still work the exact same way it did before, and you won't have to retrain your people, that sounds very appealing. On the other hand, if the software is customized, you're now open to much greater force of lock-in, and that when it comes around again to renew your license, you're locked into the system and you're locked into all of the changes they have programmed for you. Another issue with enterprise systems, and not ERP systems in particular, is emergent properties. As these systems become larger and more complex, and are composed of different modules, which may have each been tested individually, when the entire system is put together, there could be properties or behaviors that emerge only when these components talk to each other. Beyond enterprise systems, there is even a broader category, which is inter-enterprise systems. These cross organizational boundaries, such as if you think about healthcare.gov, it not only includes different agencies within the government, such as Treasury or Health Services, but it also includes the insurance companies, which are external entities. These large systems are distributed, and data integrity issues are even greater. If you think about it, you're back to having data silos, because in the case of healthcare.gov, the US government's going to keep track of some of the data from the exchanges, but also the insurance companies will want their own copy of their data. When we talked about big data, we said big data is a new oil, but who owns that oil? To recap, when looking at the scope of a process, there are three levels: workgroup, enterprise, and inter-enterprise. At both the workgroup level and the inter-enterprise, there are data silos. The point of the enterprise system is basically to eliminate these data silos, to have one centralized version of the truth. If we look at the human side, from a manager's perspective, the workgroup system is easier. You don't have to get buy-in from different groups within a company, and there's fewer people to have to retrain. When you start looking at an enterprise system, you now have to get buy-in across different functions within an organization. The cost is much greater, the risk of lock-in is higher, and the amount of training and the change in procedures can be much greater also. When you get to inter-enterprise systems, you're now talking about having different organizations involved, which each have their own different rules, and possibly even have to comply with different regulations, or have different definitions of certain terms. We are now going to look at what defines the quality of a process. The quality of a process is based on how efficient and effective that process is. So let's look at these two terms. Efficiency can be measured as the bang for your buck. You're basically looking at how much resources am I putting in for the results I'm getting out. So if you wanted to improve the efficiency of a process, you'd say, I'm going to try and get more output for the same cost. Or, given that same output, it's going to cost me less. Measuring the efficiency is usually based on some numerical value. On the other hand, the effectiveness of a process is it meeting the strategy of the organization? What metric are you going to pick for measuring that? How do you know if you're meeting the strategy? The measures for these are often less numeric and more qualitative. This can often be based on customer surveys or reviews. So which of these is harder to measure? Hopefully you realize that's effectiveness. If you wanted to improve a process, you would either be increasing the efficiency of it or the effectiveness of it. To do that, you can do one of two things. You can either change the structure of the process, or you could increase the resources devoted to the process. You could also change both. Are there trade-offs? If you look at efficiency and effectiveness, sometimes to increase the effectiveness would require more resources, which may reduce the efficiency. When trying to improve a process, if you're changing the structure, that means you're likely to be changing the procedures, which is difficult to change in an information system. In the book, they discuss some of the difficulties when you're changing an ERP system in particular, or any enterprise system. You'll need collaborative management. You need to get buy-in across different organizational components, and so everybody has to come together on that. You'll also get some resistance by employees who don't want to change procedures. Particularly with ERP systems, there's also the addition of requirement gaps. These are differences between what you want the system to do and what the blueprint they're based on is able to do. There are two approaches to addressing these gaps. The first is for the organization to change its procedures so it matches the blueprint, which can be difficult. The alternative is to customize the software so it matches the existing procedures, but this can increase the lock-in not only to the software vendor, but also to the consultants doing the customization. The last topic we're going to talk about is process automation and which processes are ripe for automation. As we turn now to process automation, please be sure to watch the video with David Auteur on Will Machines Take Away All of Our Jobs that's posted in Canvas, as well as the short HBR article, How Artificial Intelligence Will Redefine Management. In the video with David Auteur, he talks about farming and how in the last century it went from 40% of the U.S. workforce down to 2%, although we're producing more food. This was due to automation, and the question that arises is whether management is a farming job of the 21st century. Managers in a survey spent 54% of their time on tasks that involve administrative coordination and control. These are the tasks that are ripe for automation. According to Auteur, the jobs of the future require expertise, judgment, and creativity. The HBR article in Canvas on how AI will redefine management looks at these same issues and identifies 5 practices for successfully incorporating artificial intelligence into management. The first is to leave administrative tasks to the machines. These are things such as scheduling or other coordination and control tasks. Second, focus on jobs requiring judgment, creative thinking, experimentation, data analysis interpretation, and strategy development. The third is, instead of being replaced by a machine, to work with the machines, to basically use them as decision support to enhance the manager. Fourth is to think like a designer. This involves creative thinking and experimentation, but also what they call collaborative creativity. Basically not only your own creativity, but getting the most creativity out of others. Basically layering ideas on top of ideas. The fifth and final skill, which they found that managers undervalued, was to develop social skills and networking. Please be sure to watch the video and read the article in Canvas, and practice and follow the 5 practices that they outline so you become the master of the machine instead of having your job automated by the machine.